So let's talk about this brand new controller from 8BITDO. Now this controller from 8BITDO is not officially out on the market yet. It's coming out on the market October 30th for a price tag of only $25. So you can see this controller right here is relatively inexpensive for what you're getting. And you guys know I normally don't cover gaming controllers on my channel all too often because honestly I don't find them all too interesting, but this one I really wanted to cover because it's a very unique product and it's a very interesting product at that. You can see the controller on screen now, and obviously the reason I wanted to cover this controller is because, well, you can see from the picture it does have two D-pads. Yep, you heard me, two D-pads. So it has no analog sticks, it has no joysticks, it has no thumbsticks, whatever you want to call them. It just has your traditional D-pads, but it has two traditional D-pads on it. Now this controller specifically will work on a host of different products, but they're really targeting this controller to Switch users, more specifically the Switch Lite crowd. I don't know why you would want to use this on the Switch Lite, since the Switch Lite really doesn't have a way to actually prop this thing up. I guess what you could do is with the Switch Lite, you could buy a stand and then stand your Switch up on like a stand. If you bought a stand separately with it, that would solve that problem. But you can see just by the two colors, we have a turquoise one right here, and then we have a yellow one right here, and that's really trying to go for the Switch Lite crowd specifically just by these two colors alone. And like I said, this will work on pretty much any modern day device. It'll work on a PC, it'll work on Mac OS, it'll work on Android, it'll work on the Nintendo Switch, of course. This will have Bluetooth built in, and it will be able to work via USB-C. So it is nice that a lot of these companies, especially third-party companies, are really understanding the market and really understanding the Nintendo Switch, and they're actually making these products USB Type-C. And I am glad for this because they could have easily made this thing for $25 and still use the old micro USB, but micro USB is not the best connector. A lot of the times micro USB just breaks, and then on top of that you already own a Nintendo Switch, and since most likely a lot of people are going to be buying this for the Nintendo Switch, they don't want to have to worry about having an extra cable like a micro USB cable around with them. So it is nice that pretty much a lot of these accessories for the Switch and whatnot are using the modern day connector, which is USB Type-C. Now let's go ahead and look at the design of this thing. The design of this thing is very interesting. There's nothing too mind-blowing about this controller, except for, of course, the fact that this controller does have two D-pads on this controller, and that's the most interesting thing about this controller. Alongside that, it is going to have a turbo button on the actual controller itself, so if you wanted to use turbo functionality, you'll be able to use turbo functionality and things like that. But besides that, there's nothing really else going for this controller. My real question to 8BITDO is the fact that what are you actually going to be doing with two D-pads on a controller? It kind of seems weird why you would have two D-pads on a controller. Honestly, I've never used this controller. I've never played a game that needed two D-pads, so I don't really know what they're thinking behind this product. What I can say is, at least if you do end up picking this controller up, you cannot get Joy-Con drift from this product because, of course, it has no joysticks to get drifting issues on the Switch, which you guys know the Switch is one of the most common controllers that has a drifting problem, so at least you can't get that. So that's something maybe the company thought about. They're like, how do we get rid of drifting Joy-Cons and still make a controller for the Switch crowd? Well, let's put two D-pads on it instead of having two Joy-Cons or two joysticks on the controller. Maybe that was their reasoning behind making two D-pads on it. I actually want to know what game would you actually want to use two D-pads, because honestly, I don't think in practicality this makes any sense at all, but it is a cool design. Just the way this controller looks, it looks like a very tiny controller, and honestly, for me personally, I like things that are very cutesy, that are very lovable, and things like this, and this controller really does speak to me. Honestly, I almost want to buy this thing when this thing comes out for when this thing comes out on October 30th for $25, but in practicality, I don't think this thing's all that practical with two D-pads, but I really do like the design of this thing. I think the size of this thing is very nice. I actually like the colors. I actually like how they match the Switch Lite colors that are currently out on the market and things like that. But besides that, I think this pretty much wraps this up for this video alone. It's just a very unique concept, and I never seen anything like this in the gaming space at all. Who would have thought to put 2 D-pads on a controller? Only a lot of these third-party companies like 8BITDO would even think about doing something like this. So this controller is going to be very interesting. One thing I do want to actually say about this controller, which I haven't brought up yet, is the fact that the D-pad on the left side of the screen of the controller is actually treated, I do believe from this controller specifically, is still going to be treated like some type of a joystick. So if you play games that use joystick, or if you play games, excuse me, that use a D-pad, unfortunately, it's still going to register those as a joystick, unfortunately. But the good news on that is, I do know for a fact that Link's Awakening that just came out on the Switch, the remake of Link's Awakening from the Game Boy, does use only uses joystick compatibility or analog sticks, and you could never use the D-pad in the first place. So this might be a way around the whole D-pad issue of Link's Awakening if you ever wanted to use a traditional D-pad with Link's Awakening. And that does make sense since that game is a 2D game. Why wouldn't you want to use a D-pad? Most likely when it comes to games that are 2D focused in any stretch of the imagination, you want to use something like a traditional D-pad. So I think it's kind of weird how Nintendo themselves didn't even really think about allowing people to use the D-pad, which that should have been a standard thing in the first place. Why does another company have to take that out? So maybe this product was for the crowd who loves playing Link's Awakening. Maybe if you're going to be doing speed runs of Link's Awakening or playing a lot of hours of Link's Awakening, maybe this is going to be the controller for you, because now you'll have an actual D-pad to play Link's Awakening. That's something to take in consideration as well. But again, this controller is coming out October 30th for $25 by 8BITDO. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.